when I tell you that I can send out a $12,000 proposal in 8 minutes at the end of a sales call, and then they sign that day, I'm not spending hours crafting custom packages.
That's reality for Ali Grummer, the founder of Duet, an email marketing and copywriting agency for bloggers. Now, having the ability to send a $12,000 proposal and have it signed in that amount of time didn't just happen overnight. It took a $5,000 incubator program, one productized service, and an incredible investment in people. Here's my conversation with Ali Grummer, the founder of Duet.
I want to get into Duet.
Yes.
But I want to get a little bit into your background, because it seemed like from what I could tell, you were like in a lot of operations roles, and then you just kind of shifted to email. I was like, how did that shift happen? That's like, they're similar, I guess, but like there's a jump there.
Yeah.
So how did you make that jump from like operations, and if I got that right, like the operations to email marketing?
So close. I weaseled my way into operations at my first full-time job. I didn't weasel my way. My boss was like, I think you have a knack for this. And he asked that like 30 minutes a week I do something operationally to help improve the small business. It's like, it was a team of like 5. It was a video production company. But I actually studied advertising and public relations. And I have a degree in history. That one's just for bonus. That's just because I like story time, to be honest.
Yeah.
So yeah, I went to college for ad PR. And at the time, I'm just going to like set the stage, because I know that I probably look like I'm 26.
It's the mics.
Look at me hold this. Like, I know that I'm not a Gen Z. If you only knew that I like hang out with my cat and play Sudoku every night, that should tell you I'm over the age of 30. So, but in college, like, I'm in that generation. I graduated high school in 2007. Jobs that, like, we left college with jobs that didn't exist when we went to college. Yeah. So it's a real weird time. Like, I remember there was a new media class, and it was the introduction to Twitter. Ooh. And now Twitter's had a rebrand all these years later. So that's the kind of world I was in. And so I actually started a personal finance blog in addition to having this full-time job in video production right out of college. So I started the blog in 2016. I just wanted to give it a go. I had a part-time job. I was working at a coffee shop one night a week, and I was like, how can I replace my $45 a week income? Oh man, the dreams were big. The dreams were big. And so what happened is that I had a lot of friends asking me about personal finance. So that's how I got into the finance space at all. And my first financial conference was FinCon in 2016, but my site was called Ask Ali, because I had a friend stop me in the cereal aisle at the grocery store and was like, got a quick question for you about budgeting. And I was like, oh yeah, sure. We can do that here. Yeah, we can do it here. So that's how Ask Ali started. And I wrote about budgeting, debt payoff, living within your means. Super sexy stuff. I know. Yeah. So but that's how I got into the personal finance space. But then the email part came out of how just learning about blogging was like a digital playground for me. Like, remember when I was in college and nobody talked about email marketing, let alone Instagram had just started 2012, 2011, something like that. Maybe a little bit earlier than that. But, those heavily edited, filtered photos. It's my era. Of a coffee cup, you know. But I never wanted to do social media. As I built out my blog, you have to learn a lot. Like, what is a webinar? What's the purpose of a webinar? How do you write blog content? What is SEO? Yeah. How do you build a website? All of those things. And so, but in doing that, I realized email marketing was something people had issues with or had a hard time with, and it came really easily to me. So that eventually I decided to go part-time at my full-time job and pursue email marketing and advertising for freelance stuff.
Okay, so someone was really having a hard time with cereal, and that broke their budget.
Yeah.
And then that turned into a blog, and then email marketing. So it feels like they just snowballed.
It did. Like, had I not started that blog, I wouldn't have a 6-year business in email marketing 8 years later.
Are you still doing the personal finance blog?
No, I sunsetted it, with all 100 people I had on my email list. And the goal was never to grow it big. Oh, I did do budget coaching. So that's part of what came out for $50. Wow. Yeah, I was really... So that's what's crazy about being in the finance space now is literally 2016, there were no financial coaches. The idea that you would charge someone $1,500 for 3 months of one-on-one coaching did not exist. And so I didn't really see a future for the blog, but it was a way for me to get my words out and to be helpful. And somebody had told me early on too, Ali, you have a unique point of view. Just keep writing. And that was Joshua Becker from The Minimalist.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I was taking it to the bank and just realizing even though there are lots and lots of people doing what you're doing online, it doesn't mean that your voice is any less valuable or that you shouldn't be
Totally.
talking about it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I sunset AskAllie.com. You can find it on the Wayback Machine in my
Okay.
like 26-year-old
I might
self.
do that. I might do that. Do you own the domain Ask Allie?
I did for a long time.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Okay. So then how did you go from like what, okay, so was it just like, hey, I'm really interested in email marketing? Like how did that shift happen from like, oh, I'm going to do blogging and then to the email stuff?
Yeah. So I had a friend who was doing advertising like freelance, and she had questions about like online marketing type things. And so I would answer them. And then eventually she started bringing on email marketing projects because she knew I would help her with them. So it's one of those things like when it comes to self-employment, it's like, what are the things that like crop to the top? Oh man, I rhymed. And so it's one of those things like the things that come easily to you and not other people. That ends up being where the money is. And I did have someone, what was it, summer of 2018, beginning of the summer, because I started Duet in August. I met a gal at a marketing conference, and we're talking like corporate speaker, like completely not the online business space that I'm used to being in. And she just asked me, she's like, which one is more fun, the blog or helping people with online marketing?
Yeah.
And which one is going to make you more money? And I was like, well, I have no intentions of like, I don't know how long I wanted to write about personal finance. I didn't want to be a freelance writer, like a finance writer. But it was like kind of a passion project where I got to learn all these other things. And then for me, email was something like I joke about, like, yeah, I hang out with my cat and play Sudoku. Like I am like an analog-ish person. I say that, but I'm on my phone all the time like a millennial. But like, yeah, I'm not trying out new trends, things like that. And so I kind of joke that like email is like the least sexy part, like the least sexy form of marketing, right? Nobody often thinks about it, but it's also like the most stable and robust. So how often are you changing your personal email address? Mine is still, oh no, I was about to say it out loud. First name dot last name at domain.com. Like I haven't changed it since I was a freshman in college. And so it's one of those things like you build relationships with people that way and you don't lose them and you can continue to grow things over time.
So I think the question I think that's coming with it is like, all right, so you have these like people are coming to you for email, and then was that just like continue snowballing? Like how did that continue going?
Yeah. So the best friend would bring on email projects. She and I were actually going to run an agency together. And then about 5 months into that, she found out she was pregnant with twins. And I was like, you know what? You do that. I'm going to go take care of my own livelihood. Because she was technically like the CEO. And she's like, I got to bring in work for both of us. And I was like, no. You and your family just survive. I'm fine. I'm like single. I live in a bigger city. Like the idea of doing a partnership with a best friend also just felt like a really quick way to end a friendship. And I'm like, I value my friends so much. I got bullied as a kid. So my adult friends, I'm like, oh, you think I'm risking anything? You were wrong. Like, we are now together forever. And it was awkward there for a while because I really like killed the dream of starting an agency with a friend. And what happened, because I was involved in the personal finance space, I just saw so many people not using email, or they had a lot of like, I don't know, I just knew what it was capable of doing in 2017. Like I had a very little picture of what it was doing. And that's actually when I asked my bosses to go part-time. By summer of 2018, my best friend was pregnant with her twins. And I was like, okay, by August 1st, I started my own company. But it was because, like, and I niched down for bloggers because I was like, here's the thing, guys. You have so much valuable content that lives on your blog. You're not creating a way for new people to get connected with it. And it was truly that simple. It's like, I don't think bloggers are really optimizing email marketing for what it can do. And then I actually, that fall, went to a paid webinar. It was a sales webinar for a 4-month incubator on email marketing from one of I think she was like employee number 6 at ConvertKit. And I'd known who she was because she'd written some of the earliest sales emails. I'm like, I know your name from getting ConvertKit emails. And the only reason I got ConvertKit emails is because I had a blog and got into that whole space, right? And so her name is Val Geisler. And so I ended up paying $5,000 for this incubator, like 3 months into business. I asked her for like, can I pay this over 6 months? Like I was like, can I have an exception? So it was like $650 a month, which is not nothing. But I also live in Lincoln, Nebraska. My rent was $525 at the time. I know, it feels like a completely different world. Like pre-pandemic, a couple recessions, you know. But I did it and I learned her process and whatnot. What was interesting is she talked about niching down, and everybody else in the incubator, like there might have been 30 of us, maybe 40. Everyone wanted to work in SaaS and e-com because that's what Val's background was. I felt like the weird kid who was like, I just want to work with bloggers.
With people you don't even know. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're like, okay, like, is that even an industry? Do people even make money blogging? And I was like, pretty sure. Like, but I was so timid about it. But it was so fun because that summer I met with a business coach, really honed in on my my elevator pitch and whatnot. And then I went back to FinCon and I had people like lining up because they were like, oh, you'll do it for me. Oh, you'll do it for me. My company's called Duet, has a few different meanings. One is that it sounds like do it. Like
Yeah.
I realize that my strength is is as an implementer.
Okay.
Yeah, like you have great ideas. I'll help make them happen. And then the other part is that a duet is, you know, two people coming together to make something really great. And so I'm like, I tell my clients, like, you are the master of your craft.
Yep.
And I'm really good at email. Together we can create a really great experience for your subscribers.
That's so interesting because I know like ConvertKit or Kit. I don't know what
It's
to call
Kits
it.
now.
It's Kit now.
Yeah.
But like it was interesting like because I've done a little bit on like their story a little bit, and like they also niched down. They were like, we're just doing newsletters, and everyone's like, well, what's a newsletter? And then they went to bloggers. So it's interesting that like you saw that too.
Yeah.
And we're like, all right, let's double down on that piece. But okay, so the accelerator piece, like, was there anything like other than niching down, was there anything else that like really came through that?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, it's my first massive investment. And so it was like 100% new knowledge to me. You know, I had other people who'd gone through the mastermind or the incubator who had taken other courses. So for them, they like got a sliver here and there. And I was like, I want the whole Thanksgiving meal. Like everything was important to me, like how to interact with clients. Yeah, just even using language like in my audit of just like, don't say like, I think you should do this, like do this. Just like how I present myself, or even talking with clients about how like like even though it's just an audit, it's like now I'm on your team, we can accomplish this or whatnot. Like you are now kind of part of their business. So language like that. But the biggest thing was the framework for my services, which I still use to this day, which is basically an audit. I call it the email strategy playbook because it's more than an audit. It's also like so many ideas.
Yeah.
And I can tell you all about that too. But then that's the first phase of what I call the Duet debut. So people can do it individually or they do it as part of our bigger done for you service. So we do an audit of everything because I basically can't give you strategy or insight unless I know what's actually happening and how you're currently using a platform or how your audience is engaging with you. We do audience research, which I think is pretty unique. And we do a strategy for 15 emails, kind of used however. Everything from like, what's the topic? What's the one big idea? What's the call to action? Are we tracking any clicks? Like it's really in depth. We write those 15 emails for the client and put them all in whatever email service platform that they use. So I also kind of had like a differentiating factor that I'm not just a copywriter who just hands you the copy and hopes for you to do it. Because I'm over here like, no, girl, I've got control issues. Why don't I just do the whole thing for you? But honestly, it's like so many bloggers are so busy like creating content, figuring out Google updates, they are, yeah. People are like, people make money blogging? I was like, yes. And also like these women, especially because I work a lot with food bloggers now, and most of them are women, but like they're like isolated in their house, developing brand new recipes, learning about food photography and SEO. Like they're like really Renaissance women. And so I'm like, I just take this part off of their plate. And it's great because I get, especially with the audience research, because we get to like comb out from their existing audience why they love this creator. And I get to give that back to my clients.
That's so cool.
And I was like, how often do you get to hear from your people why they open your emails, why they love your recipes, why they would totally buy a cookbook from you? Like, and so that's like the little sliver of the whole process, but it's my favorite. Because I'm like, is that encouraging to you? Because I want you to be in business for a really long time, but I don't want you to feel like you're living in a silo as well.
Totally. Because right, like creators, I feel like you don't always get good feedback. Like a view is like, and watch time and like, or like the page view, like that's just a metric. It's not like the real life feedback.
Right.
I think that's the hard part of like the creator journey piece of that.
Yes.
Okay. So then a couple of things I'm going to like double click on.
Yep.
So it seems like from this and then like me doing like a little bit of creeping and researching at you
Proud of you.
so it seemed like, right. So this FinCon seems to be, or like conferences and like being in the right communities. And then maybe like being a guest on other podcasts seem to be like the main drivers for like for what you're doing. Is there any other, like, are those the two ones? And like, is there any other channels like I'm missing?
I'm sorry, are you creeping in to the inside of my business? How did you know that? Yeah, it's always been events and relationships. But yeah, being on a podcast, I was on the Food Blogger Pro podcast in the fall of 2019.
Yeah.
Do you want to know why? Because Val Geisler, who led my incubator, got asked to be a guest on this food blogging podcast, and she goes, "Actually, I have one student from my incubator who's into blogging. Why don't I just send her your way?" And it was me. So I'm like, I niched down, which meant I rose to the top. And then for 8 months, I got leads in the food blogging space. Back when podcasts would generate that much in actual client sales. But yeah, so events, referrals now as well, because I've been doing this for so long and I have such a tight process and people really enjoy the customer service as well as the actual thing that we produce for them and how it makes them feel in the end. I know we like kind of touched on processes, but like because I've been doing the same thing for so long, it is a tight process.
Yeah.
So we can dive into that as much as you want, but I want to answer your questions in order.
Okay. So then, so the other thing, right, you're mentioning, right, is the packages.
Yes.
So I know that's a big debate, like packages versus like hourly rates, whatever. Like, what are your thoughts on
Oh my
like?
gosh, people are not still doing hourly, are they?
I've heard a little bit.
No, I have productized services. When I tell you that I can send out a $12,000 proposal in 8 minutes at the end of a sales call, and then they sign that day, like I'm not spending hours crafting custom packages, which might feel really weird as like a copywriter. You're like, but the scope, I'm like, I've defined the scope. Like I'm not writing landing pages. I'm not creating your opt-in. I'm not creating your PDF lead magnet. Like, but you can put a price point on those things, and you can always you can know your internal hourly rate. Like I'm tracking product like profitability on the back end. Don't you worry, because I'm a nerd about it. But so my productized services are just like, this is the scope of it, and like I try and communicate as much as I can to the client, like what they can expect, what we don't do. I'm really clear about like, no, I'm actually not going to be sending your weekly newsletter as a result. Or no, you actually only get one template, email template. Beyond that, we do have an hourly rate as an agency, which we haven't even hit on that. It's not just me. It's like a whole team. But yeah, and I would do that even when I was totally doing it all on my own. I had a package. You get the audit, the research, the strategy, the emails, the tech setup, and that service used to be $4,500, and now it's $12,000. But yeah, like it makes it really easy to sell what people need. I also can I give you and your people a big piece of advice of like when you have a direction that you think you're going to enjoy. One of the biggest ways to see if it's successful is to stay going in that direction for a long time. Something that I see a lot with freelancers that they like, we'll try this, we'll try this, we'll try this. And they're in that experimental phase for like more than a year, where they're just constantly like, oh, it didn't work for 30 days. I'm like, you got to stick with it for like 6 months. You got to like, and I also feel like I hit the jackpot and part of it is I didn't hit the jackpot. I paid $5,000 to learn this from Val because it worked for her. Right. But like I hit the jackpot in the fact that like my services just have always performed well. And I haven't needed to go find a different niche, like, And I hit on all of that within 1 year of business, like at the 1 year mark, basically. I like declared email marketing automations for bloggers.
Yeah. I
decided I'm not doing launch copy. I'm not doing sales pages. I'm not doing social media. And I just picked a direction and I went in it. And I'm still excited about email. So I feel like I got really lucky.
Okay, quick break from this conversation with Allie. I want to tell you about something I've been working on that relates to this conversation. For the last 8 months, I've been studying founders like Allie, people who have bootstrapped their way from 0 to 250K in revenue. And now it's all in a report that shows the actual strategies these founders used to grow their businesses. You can read all about it in the Bootstrap report in the description of this episode. Back to the conversation with Allie and how she went from 0 to over 250K in annual revenue.
Okay, so that kind of matches the timeline I've seen from others too.
Yeah.
So from what I've seen, so I've only done you'll be like 13 or 14 of these deep dives.
Yeah.
And it seems like the number of time, the time it takes to go from 0 to 250K in annual revenue is like 2 years.
Jeez Louise.
It's almost automatic.
Okay, it took me 6.
Okay. For like that's great because like I think which is like, I feel like everyone that I've talked to has been like 0, 0, like, and then,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
maybe I'm wrong about that.
Oh.
But then so that's been a really interesting data point. But it seems like also, right, like niching down has been like the thing you got to do, because if people don't know what you do, like, right, if you were just like, I do newsletters, well, like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
So let's say you're interested in a lot of different things. Like, how would you advise like others to like think through that maybe?
It's way more fun to be running a business when you're making money. And I'm not like a money motivated person.
Yeah.
And so find the thing that will actually make you money, because once you are, then you can go and do a lot more of the fun stuff. Like, so much of it is focus, because there's a reason I didn't have a website my whole first year of business. Like, I need to figure out how to make a sustainable living. Then I can focus on building a website. Then I can focus on writing blog content and sending out a weekly email. It's like, yeah. So I spent that whole first year just learning and doing, and like doing the scrappy sales piece of it. Like, who do you know? Do you want to hop on a sales call? Like, and you're refining a bunch that way. I think part of the reason maybe why it's taken me a lot longer than some folks is like, I don't do any social media. Like, I don't know if social media would have, I don't know. That's a whole other place, I guess, to like go get clients. Like, I've just always done a lot more of a slow business. I would rather have a really solid customer like experience and product, and like we have it so tight. Like my Asana templates per project, but also like the questions we ask at different phases of the project. Like, we've got it like locked down. Like, that's the place that I was spending my time and energy, or bringing on a team member and making sure that they had everything that they need, and our internal communication worked, and balls didn't get dropped for clients. Like, I've just focused so much on quality of that I worried less about showing up on social media or Pinterest or things like that. So yeah, going to conferences a few times a year and just being really good at follow-up, and then podcasting, providing, making sure that I went and shared the podcast. Like, podcast hosts love me because they're like, she does the things that we want her to do. And I'm like, great. And so it's like my focus on like, these are my few marketing channels, but like one of your best marketing channels is how your clients feel when they work with you and what they tell to other people.
One of the things that's interesting about your story is like, you're like an operator through and through, it seems like. And I think that there's been like, from my perspective is like, being an operator has led a lot of people to be like, oh, I'm a joiner to startups or these ventures rather than like founding stuff. And like, from my standpoint, it seems like there's a gender like gap with that too.
Okay, tell me more.
So I'm curious, like, from your experience, like being the operator and then like turning to founder, like the founder hat.
Yeah.
Like, do you see like all that experience? Because I feel like people are like, oh, you have to be so salesy and like so markety to be a founder, or like very product led. Like, there's the two dynamics.
Interesting.
Versus operator. So like, how have you seen like the operator side like come out in like the founder side?
Yeah, I mean, if we're being honest, I worked for a small business for 5 years, and I learned QuickBooks in college when I worked for a small ad agency. I went to school for branding and advertising. I know what a creative brief is. Like, so part of it is like, it's cumulative knowledge in skill set in place. I kid you not, when the first 10 days of running a business, I don't think I slept. The first 2 years were really, really anxious. But I would tell myself, I'm like, Allie, you have more skills than the average person to run a business. And so like, I'm not saying that to be cocky. I'm saying that I was self-aware of the fact that like a lot of people start stuff with a lot more gumption and a lot fewer skills. And so, but part of it is almost like you could almost get crippled by it. Like, girl, why are you creating these Asana templates when you could be doing social media? Part of it was like, because there's operator and there's an idea. Have you ever heard of 4 Eyes? Is that what it's called? Foresight. FOURSIGHT. I used to do this personality thing with my old company. And I realized I'm a heavy implementer. So I worked with a lot of creatives. So you can have ideas, but if you don't put them through development and implementation, they just fall short. And so I'm like, well, I'm just going to pick the few ideas that actually make the most sense long term. And that's where I'm going to put my time and energy, right? So if I do have a team member, I'm investing in the right person. And if I'm going to run this ship by myself, I'm going to make a system so that it's smoother for me. So I have more capacity to do creative things like write blog posts. So I guess that's probably where the operational side came from. It was like, it takes a long time to do things well.
Yep.
And so I'm just going to pick the few things that I'm actually going to focus on and let that be okay. I just shut out a lot of what the online business space says to focus on.
Okay. Fair. That's true. I'd be curious, like, how you see that piece. Like, what are they always saying, and or what's the path that you took that's very different from that?
Yeah. So I always tell new entrepreneurs to limit the amount of people you listen to, like maximum 5, because there are lots of different ways to grow businesses, and they're not all wrong. They're not all like trying to, pull the wool over your eyes. Like, they're legitimate businesses, but they do end up contradicting one another. And then you end up either not taking action or feeling really, what's the opposite of confident? Not confident in the actions you are taking because you feel like, oh, it's falling short, it's falling short. It's like, pick the few people that you actually want to learn and listen to, and just like let those be your guiding voices. Don't get overwhelmed with all the different things that are possible. I also always tell people, don't buy anything for the first 6 months. Because like, here I was buying a Pinterest course. I'm like, oh, you don't even know how to write a blog post. How are you going to Pinterest anybody to what blog? Like, and so it's like, it's going to save you a lot of money. The other thing that having a business coach, honestly, because I'm such a external processor, and like, so I had my first, I finished the incubator, and the next thing I really had to figure out was my own branding, my own, like, how am I going to present myself at conferences? How do I tell people what I'm up to and how they can work with me? And there was a $1,000 8-week course, or there was a $1,500 2-hour intensive with a coach. And I knew in my own self that, like, I can go through that 8-week course and I can go through and do all the exercises. Like, I'm really good at homework. And at the end of it, still not be 100% sure if it's correct for me.
Yeah.
It's like, I needed some sort of validation. And so I was like, I would rather pay $500 more, do it in 2 hours, and have someone say, yes, Allie, there's your elevator pitch. Yes, there's your marketing strategy. Yes, this is how you should go into FinCon this fall, and like, this is how you get clients. This is how many clients. This is how much you should charge. Like, we covered so much in 2 hours. And like, I just knew I needed a little bit of that external validation for someone to say, okay, now go, now run. Like, otherwise I think I would have just been spinning my wheels for a really long time.
Fair. That's really fair. Okay. So then it took 6 years to get to 250K. It was awesome. Was growth like kind of just up and to the right, or like, how did like that growth curve like look, I guess?
Yeah, it's been up and to the right for years. And then this time last year, like 12 months ago, I look back at last FinCon, I was like, was I depressed? I might have been depressed because my profit margins were so low and I couldn't figure out why. Because my team I have a lot of team members, but like, we operate very lean. Like, we know how long the different things take, and that's how many hours they get to work on it. But I was like, I can't trim back my team expenses. What is going on? And a sweet friend of mine who works as like a CFO, a fractional CFO, sat down with me at FinCon last year. We were roommates. We pulled up our laptops. We ordered pizza from room service, and we just sat there. This was like Sunday night before we're flying home. Like, we'd spent all day in New Orleans, and then we're like, okay, remember, we're going to look at Allie's numbers before we go home. And we sat there, and we realized it actually takes me more cost to acquire a client than to serve them.
Interesting.
So that's where my profit margin was low, like why there wasn't actually more money in the bank, because going to conferences is expensive, right? It's not, I mean, you could also spend just as much money hiring a social media manager or whatever, like, but I'd gone to a couple conferences that just produced no new leads. Like, it was a little more of like a social thing. And it's like, okay, at some point, we need these to pay off. So, so that was a real good wake-up call. And what's funny is that the year before that, she told me to double my rates. And I was like, no one will pay that. And then last fall, it was literally like, if you don't raise your rates, you're not going to have a business. Like, I got to shut down the agency side and just do coaching. And I was like, no, I've worked so hard to create these systems, and I know they work and they get results for my clients. And so, over this past 12 months, I raised my rates, and now my offer, this time last year was maybe $7,850, is now $12,000. I offer one-on-one coaching, and this time last year I just started it, and now it's like $8,500 for 6 months. Like, now I'm like in a better profit margin type area. Which just feels a lot better. I mean, it allowed me to move to Nashville from Lincoln, Nebraska. My rent is no longer $525 in the year of our Lord 2024, in the fastest growing mid-sized city in the States. It's been upwards and to the right. But I definitely hit a bit of a plateau. And I had heard, these are the things, like the little gems that I've heard from people. One thing I always heard was like, your team is your most important asset. And I believed that, and I put resources, like my time and energy, behind that. The other one that I heard was, if you're having a hard time breaking past 250, it's all mindset. It's not because you don't have the ability. And I was like, so last year I was like, hired this new business coach, and I was like, work on my mindset. I don't want to plateau. And so, so in the last year, I mean, my revenue is up almost 50% because I raised my rate on that signature offer, created a smaller done-for-you offer, and I have this one-on-one coaching. And now I just feel like I'm actually in a place to thrive and breathe, and now also live in a new city that's really exciting.
That's awesome. It seems like everything's like coming together in a really
It
nice.
feels a lot better. Yeah, it's funny because I don't think I would have said I was depressed last year, but I'm like, looking back, boy, you were sad. Like, and it was frustrating and confusing because like there is a lot of fear about raising your rates, and and I had a client this week before coming to FinCon, had a sales call on Monday and a full paid in full invoice the very next day. I had never met her before. She was a referral, and that's at the $12,000 price point. And you're just like, okay, yeah. So much of it is kind of in our heads.
So would you say that working on your business today is easier or harder than when you first started?
Working on the business?
Yeah.
It's a great question. No, but it is more complicated because you just have a lot more avenues. I have a lot more people to manage. I will say though, as part of managing people, I don't know how I did it, but I have 9 contractors who love my business as much as I do and love my clients as much as I do, which is always people's hang-ups. They're like, you gotta hire them as employees so they care. And I was like, do I? And I somewhat joke that on my tombstone it'll say, did you update the SOP for that? So in a way, I've had to instill that in my team members and give them buy-in for why that matters, not just for their role, but I'm like, would you like to go on vacation and not stress everybody else out on the team? Somebody else can take that role. You just got to write it down and make sure it's up to date. And so it's like, yeah. Or if they want to move into doing different things in the business, I'm like, great, write that down and I'll hire someone else to do that piece of it.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of internal buy-in. So as far as working in the business, it's mostly about team members and it's mostly about me now. So I hired this business coach last summer and I adore her. I brought her on to help me develop this coaching program. And within a month, I was like, well, I didn't know we would make me a better CEO. I didn't know that was on your agenda, Anna. And it did, because I was stressing my team out. Yeah. And I, from the outside, you're like communication-wise. Everything was in Slack. I was giving, excuse my language, half-assed tasks with no deadlines, not enough information. Kid you not, here we go. Because this has been so much for my internal growth as a CEO. And it kind of hits you upside the head. You have these one-on-ones with my team members. I do it maybe once or twice a year because I run a tight ship. Everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing, and unless there's a problem, and we fix it when the problems arise. But I was doing one-on-ones just to check in and see how are you doing in the role? What else do you want to be doing? And is there anything I can do to make it easier? 4 out of 5. 4 of that kindly said, it's you. You're the problem. And I was like, me? I'm the problem? But first of all, I want to consider that a win that people feel open enough to be able to tell me that.
Yeah.
But then I cried for 2 weeks. Because I was like, it's me. And they're like, yeah, the way that things are getting lost in Slack or you're giving us half-assed tasks or there's not a deadline, they're rushing to get things done because I'm the boss. And I was like, absolutely not. Whatever Laura, my project manager, tells you to do, she really runs the ship, okay? I tell people all the time, I'm like, she is the feather in my cap. I'm so proud that she is on my team. And just she manages 7 people, 6 people. She's 7. Yeah. And so it's different work when you're at this point, because the other thing too is I can't, what did someone say today? As you grow, the hustler has to die. You can't be the person who's whipping out newsletter content the day before it needs to go out. Not when you have a team. Yep. Because the last thing I want to do is cause them more stress. So even before I tell a team member that I'm working on this new idea, I'm launching a podcast soon, I'm like, you need to think through some stuff. You need to figure out what the podcast is, what the timeline-ish is, how much you're going to hire out, whatever. I need to get some answers organized before I just throw them on my sweet executive assistant and expect her to know what to do. So it's different work.
Totally fair. So what was the biggest hurdle from going to 0 to $250K in annual revenue, and then how did you overcome it?
Ooh, okay. So because I haven't told you this story yet. So at Craft and Commerce 2023, I had a big come to Jesus with making money and whatnot and my worth around that. And it was so interesting because I ended up teaching the mastermind prior to the actual event starting, which this mastermind is made up of 6, 7-figure businesses. Some of them are multi-7-figure businesses, and I'm just rolling in there with I might break 200,000 this year, And I taught a session and everyone was like, it felt like no one was paying attention. Come to find out, my friend, who also is an email marketer in the room, messaged me on Slack right after. He goes, "You did so great." Everyone was taking notes. And I was like, "Oh, thank God. That's why they weren't like looking at me." I was like, "Hello? Like, anyone here?" But what it did is it really affirmed a couple things. Like, I've been having my head down doing my work for so long that I finally looked up and realized that the work I was doing was actually more valuable to more people. And maybe I was playing it small. It was kind of my first permission to like, what does it mean to like expand this and have a greater impact? I felt like I was like hiding a lamp under a bushel. That's biblical, right? It's like, and it's like, what if, like you've been working so hard, it's also okay now to go and tell people, because I was just kind of working in my own little incubator and doing a really good job. And I look up and everyone's like, "Wow, you're smart. Wow, you know stuff." And I'm like, "I don't know stuff. Like, what do you know?" And so one of my friends has since told me, he was one of them at that event. He goes, "Allie, your biggest issue is your obscurity." And so it's been a really good challenge. Not like, as you can tell, I'm not a person who's like, "I want to show up on Instagram and TikTok." And like, I'm like, I don't even know how to hold this mic. I'm like, what are the Gen Zers doing? So it's not out of fame or anything like that. It's really just a matter of like growing my impact. And that's actually where my coaching program came out of that. I was like, actually, there are ways that I can help more people and show up in a little bit bigger, expanded way.
Yeah.
So that was, and part of it was doing the work of like believing that I already have what it takes to go and take up a little bit more space online.
Yeah.
And hiring a business coach is no cheap feat either. So like I keep saying I have these coaches, but like, I mean, if you're asking for me, if I'm asking people to invest $12,000 with me, I can invest $10,000 in a business coach for 6 months and believe on the other end of it, I'm going to become a better boss, a better business owner, going to enjoy my personal life more. My clients are going to get a better experience, going to be more profitable when you hire the right coach. I can't say that for all coaches, but yeah, so I was willing to take that risk and do that work.
That's awesome. So where can people learn more about you and the work that you're doing?
You can learn more about me at duett.co, D-U-E-T-T, with 2 T's, .co. That's the best place to learn more about me. On my resources page, there's all sorts of free ways to get a resource, to join my email list. That's honestly the best way to stay connected with me. You can reply back at any email, and it's going to land in my inbox. And then I'm launching a podcast called Happy Subscribers.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's all I got.
Cheers.
That's my conversation with Allie Grummer, the founder of Duet. If you found it helpful, I would love it if you can give it a like. And if you're looking for more content like this, check out the Bootstrap report in the description of this video.